I introduced you the real deal. We've got lots of television, lots of film, lots of actors pretending to be astronauts and people exploring space, but these people do. So please welcome lovely representatives from ESA.
So we're going to talk to you a bit about human spaceflight, so how to be an astronaut, what we're doing in low Earth orbit, and replicators in LEO, lunar, and beyond. And we'll see if it's trick or gate replicators as we get there. So a little bit about myself. No tech issue. Okay. So I'm Andrea. I did university in Australia and South Korea, although I'm Australian Italian. My thesis, I did a supersonic ramjet that we launched on a rocket on Woomera. I did control systems for lots of different industries, worked in underground mining for 5 years, and then transferred 12 years ago, to the International Space Station directly, and I've been loving that since. And I learned the word engineer watching Star Trek. So the space station itself is the closest thing that we have to the Federation. It's a massive thing. It's about the size of a football field all up. It's a 5-bedroom house kind of with living space inside, and about 4 bedrooms worth are the science laboratories, so the Russian, the American, the European, and the Japanese science laboratories. It's a really amazing collaboration. We've had humans in space for 23 years at this point, continuously. And originally they were all going to build their own space stations, and then the engineers figured out how to make it work together so we could assemble it in space like Lego. The mission controls and the support is really all over the world. And it's not just Houston like the movies, it's actually Houston, Huntsville, Munich, Oberpfaffenhofen, but we say Munich, and Moscow, Korolev, and Scuba in Japan. And then in Europe, it's not just Oberpfaffenhofen, it's Oberpfaffenhofen and actually Köln-Wannheide, so in the Nähe von die Flughafen, just here. And then the science centers are actually distributed between many different countries in Europe. So there is one here in Köln also, and then all the way from Spain up to Norway, and several countries in between. So we're very international and collaborate together really well with that. This is myself on console. My role when I'm working is Eurocom, so I'm one of the people that talks to the astronauts and facilitates the activities between the flight control team, the scientists, the engineers, and the astronauts themselves. My position has a different name depending which location we are out of those 5 mission controls as mentioned, so Capcom, Paycom, JCOM, Eurocom, or Glavnik. We constantly are running hundreds of different science experiments. The astronauts set them up. We can take over with ground commanding. We can do lots of parallel commanding between these 4 different science labs. So we're running really hundreds of things all the time. Living in space has its own challenges as well as fun, and we try and incorporate holidays and other special occasions into astronaut lives. Exercise, however, is 2 hours every single day, and you don't get a day off. So that's the most important thing, because our bodies will adapt quite quickly to going up to microgravity, but if you want to come back down to Earth again, you need to do countermeasures. And what we've discovered over the years means you need to do about an hour of cardio on either the treadmill or the bicycle, which is a flywheel, and the other hour is advanced resistive exercise on this amazing all-in-one gym machine. You can kind of see it in the background there. It's the gold device, which operates with vacuum resistance. So that's how it functions in microgravity. The cupola, built in Europe, gives us all of the amazing views of Earth, so all of the photos and videos that the astronauts take, as well as controlling robotics for the space station will come out of the cupola. The space station itself, as mentioned, was built by all the different countries. Quite a lot of the American modules, though, were actually built by us in Europe. So that includes the cupola, which is why it's called the Italian name, Node 1, Node 2, the Columbus Science Laboratory, of course, and the PMM. We are the closest thing to the Federation. We're already a lot of countries in Europe as the European Space Agency that work together. And then additionally, you know, you've got other people like myself that, okay, I'm Italian, but we've got other colleagues that can work as contractors and that have lots of different nationalities, so we can really work together very collaboratively, and that's very unique to ESA. And it's an awesome work environment in that sense. And then the space station itself is another layer that's, you know, just the closest thing ever to Star Trek, really. So we just had a brand new class of astronauts, so I wanted to talk to you a bit about that. We had an amazing amount of applications from every single ESA member state, so over 22,000 applications, yeah, every single member state applied. We actually had about 2/3 female this time compared to 1/6 last time, and from that we down selected for the second round to about 1,300, and then also had the astronaut with a physical disability selection as well in parallel, and we're selecting for that too. So the selection process is quite long. It went for about a year and a half, more or less, and had many different processes in between: psychological, medical, standardized physics and engineering, and other tests. And then from that, we selected our brand new 5 European career astronauts. So now our active astronaut corps here in Cologne is quite nicely expanded. The original Shenanigans 2009 are still very active. They're flown once or twice each. Andy is about to launch quite soon. And then we have also the new class of astronauts that have just started on social media and will be doing their basic training and preparing for their first flight. And yeah, so this is from literally their first week of basic training. John, who was selected as the para-astronaut, he's an amazing Paralympian, as well as an orthopedic surgeon, and he will be joining us for training starting in July. So now we have had a lot of ESA astronauts in space, and we punch above our weight. We should probably only have 1 astronaut flying every 2 years, but we fly an astronaut basically every year, and we look forward to flying the next ones as well. So here you can see a few months ago the announcement with the new ESA astronauts, as well as the reserve astronauts. So uniquely this time, we also selected 12 reserves, which includes John, although he'll go through a more specific program with the aim to fly. And that way, these countries can, if they decide to call up their astronauts at any time, they've got somebody ready to go. And there's a couple that are pretty close, I can't say which ones, but they're already looking at flying them. So that's excellent. That's kind of what we were aiming for, to try and get even more Europeans in space. So right now in space, let's do a bit of a countdown. So how many astronauts do you think are on the space? Well, not necessarily just on the space station, there's a hint already. How many astronauts are currently in low Earth orbit in space right now? So we're going to start the countdown at 15. So hands up if you think there are 15 astronauts in space right now. All right, 14, 13, 12, 10, wait, I missed 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, lonely dude. That only happened once. He was pretty good though, he managed it well and flew again. So it's a very unique answer right now actually. I think I only saw maybe 7 people get it. 14. And that answer is quite unique, because if FedCon was any other weekend, it would not be that answer. It would be 10. But right now we have, additionally, a private mission headed up by 63-year-old Commander Peggy Whitson, who holds the record for the longest time ever of any American in space, and she's adding to her record every single day. She's also a total machine. We're loving having her back on the space station. She's just blitzed all the activities, cleared our task list. Don't know if there's going to be much left to do when she leaves. No, that's not true. There's always more science and other things. But yeah, we have the main core crew for the space station, 7 people. We've got the Axiom crew, 4 people. And then separately on Tiangong 2, there are 3 Chinese astronauts as well. So busy times in space at the moment. So when you become, as mentioned, an astronaut candidate, the training will go for 1.5 to 2 years. And then once you're done with that, you can be selected for specific mission training. Usually a long duration mission will be 6 months on orbit, and then about 6 months post-flight. So whatever your background, the astronaut backgrounds will be engineering, science, medical doctor, or military pilot. And then you have to learn everybody else's specialties. So all the engineering, all the science, as well as medicine and dentistry, because, you know, you're the doctor, the dentist, the plumber, the electrician. You're all the things when you're on orbit with your crewmates. Additionally, you need to do, you know, scuba diving for practicing spacewalks. Human behaviour and performance is a fancy way of saying teamwork, but teamwork is insanely important for all of our astronaut operations these days. Parabolic flights for simulating microgravity. Robotics is very important. Photography and videography, when you're going around at 28,000 kilometres an hour, you're 400 kilometres up approximately for the low Earth orbit. It's quite a skill to be able to take really good photos. Russian language is still essential. Everyone has to know English language and Russian language for the space station, survival skills, and a lot of other things. The training takes place in Houston, in Köln, here with us, in Star City in Moscow, and Tsukuba in Japan. So the astronauts with their crewmates, so 3 or 4 as a group, will go around these locations for their training for that whole time. So as mentioned, the basic training, then pre-assignment training, and then specific increment training once you're assigned to a mission. And then the rockets have varied that the astronauts can go up on. At the moment, Soyuz was our reliable one for 9 years. We only had Soyuz. Now we've got Soyuz and Dragon that we can alternate using between. And there's a few others in the works. So if you're going up on a Soyuz, you'll have your final insanely long, crazy exams. And then you have to sit in an interrogation board, and then you get certified to fly, and you can sign the book in Yuri Gagarin's office. And plant your tree if it's your first time going up into space. Soyuz launches are really impressive. I've done Soyuz and Dragon launches as crew support. I mean, you can feel it. You feel the heat, you feel the vibrations. It's wonderful. It's quite efficient to get up with the Soyuz. Originally it was a couple of days, and now it's like 3 hours. So it's really quite quick to be able to dock with the space station. After that, there's a hatch opening. They'll call their family and the space agency is back on Earth, and then get to work. For SpaceX, it's a bit different. It's in Florida. It takes, they go to the pad in a Tesla, and then it takes usually a day or 2 for them to dock with the station. And then they'll do a brief hatch opening ceremony. So this is when Peggy and the Axiom crew arrived just a few days ago. They'll do the first call to Earth, and then they get to work. So once on the space station, it is extremely busy. You've got a lot of tasks to do with onboard operations in all of the different laboratories, as you can see with Serena and Samantha working here. Sometimes the astronaut themselves are the experiments for different medical experiments as well as health checks. Their days are really, really packed. So their timelines will be very busy, kind of all day, every day, but very important, you'll always notice 2 hours of exercise on everybody's timeline, and that's really, really critical. Spacewalks will be a special activity that happens every so often, that they'll go out for specifically choreographed tasks. They're extremely arduous. You can't really eat, you can't eat when you're out there, and you've only got about a litre of water, and you're going for 6 or 7 hours at a time, so it's a pretty heavy activity. Samantha recently did a Russian spacesuit EVA, which is quite unique, to install a new European robotic arm that we sent up. Then, different special operations like capturing visiting vehicles for cargo. There are ways to interact, so you can see the telemetry of what we see in real time. If you just Google ISS Live Displays, you'll find some of the telemetry that we're looking at from different consoles. Once the mission is up, if you're coming back in a Soyuz, you're landing somewhere in the Kazakhstan desert, and you'll be recovered quite quickly. If you're coming back in the SpaceX, then you'll be landing somewhere around Florida, so the Gulf of Mexico, or in the ocean side. And then myself, one of my team, and one of the doctors will go out on the boat via helicopter to retrieve the crew. We'll take them back on the helicopter, and the boat then is really slow. The boat takes about a day and a half to get back to land with the capsule itself. So that's really cool. Okay, obviously I can't right now, but normally we get helicopter certified every couple of years as well, so that we can go and do the rescue ops with the helicopter, which is super fun. Well, the certification is exhausting, but the ops are pretty fun. Then post-flight for about 6 months, you're rotating back around the Houston, Köln, Star City, and Scuba. And then when astronauts aren't flying, they've got quite a lot to do on Earth. So they have different technical positions within the space agency. So for example, Alexander Gerst and I currently run the astronaut division and operations for ESA here in Köln. You can also watch and listen live anytime. So if you Google, just ISS live stream, you'll find that. It's on YouTube now as well. And you'll get the embedded audio over the top as well. Anytime you hear an Australian accent, a female Australian accent, it's going to be me. And there's a guy in Japan at the Japanese Space Agency now who grew up in Brisbane, and he sounds like Steve Irwin, and he's now a certified JCOM, and it's amazing. He sounds more Australian than I do. And this is a photo that Kayla took recently. It shows the Rhine all the way from Koblenz to Dusseldorf, which I thought was a super nice nighttime shot that she took. You can also spot the station going overhead, have an alert on your phone or your email, and it looks like a shooting star going across the entire sky. It's quite amazing. So back at the European Astronaut Centre here in Mannheim, we do a lot of different activities. One of my other main activities is making space food. So we make really amazing space food, mostly Italian and French based, but also from the other different cultures of each of the astronauts that go up. We'll make specific bonus food from their countries together with a chef from their country, which is a really awesome program. You have to be very careful. You can't have carbonation, you can't have crumbs or anything too heavy or salty, and there's a lot of constraints that we have with that, and of course it has to be very healthy and nutritious as well. So here's an example of some of the space food that we made for different astronauts. We're very efficient with water recycling. So we recycle generally around 80% of all of the water on station, including condensation, urine processing, etc. So it's a pretty good closed loop. And then we're expanding. So Aidan's going to touch on this. We're building a giant lunar training facility, and also he operates an army of awesome engineers and scientists and others that are looking at really futuristic Star Trek and other technologies. So, Aidan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay, thanks everyone for your coming today to this talk. So my name is Aidan Cowley. I'm a scientist with the European Space Agency. I've been working with the agency now for 10 years. Irish, UK originally. And got an interesting background in a whole different variety of technologies. So unlike my colleague Andrea here, who's been looking more on the crew support aspect, I'm actually looking more into the technologies that we need for exploration going forward. So I've got a team which I call Spaceship PhD, based at the European Astronaut Centre. And I like to think of this team as basically a combination of this gentleman, who's actually somewhere in the building, I believe, and a deep love for human spaceflight. So you're stuck in an environment like space. What can you find and use to make yourself survive for longer? What kind of resources can you find? And this is part of the ethos of my team. I'll be explaining more a little bit about that shortly. First of all, I want to talk about technology and how science fiction really helps drive my work forward. I'm deeply inspired by science fiction. I'm a big Trekkie. I've watched everything Star Trek since I can remember. So when I got into this job, they were asking me to think of what technologies do we need for space. I was like, well, let's look at the index of what technologies come from things like Star Trek and other science fiction shows, because there's great inspiration to take from there. And one of the most obvious things is the classical Star Trek replicator. What an awesome piece of technology. It allows you to produce items, food, from basically matter and energy, which is super cool. Now, I have to give you a spoiler warning, we're not quite there yet, but we are getting closer and closer. To give you an example, here's a classical Mark 11 replicator from Star Trek Next Generation, which I'm more attached to perhaps than other Star Treks. And you can see a desktop 3D printer which you can purchase now for like €400. The reality is that the technology has been inspired by things like replicators, and now we're trying to add more and more capabilities to these kind of 3D printers to make them something we can use on board the space station, and not just the space station, but as you go further into the solar system. This isn't just a nice thing to have, this becomes actually quite essential, and I'll explain why in a second. But first of all, a little bit of promotion for ESA. Here's one of the latest 3D printers that we as the agency have flown to the station. It's called the MELT 3D printer, and it allows you to basically print a wide variety of thermoplastic materials. So we can essentially print plastics quite effectively in space. It's pretty cool. This can print in any orientation because, of course, aboard the space station there is no gravity. So if you print upside down, there is no upside down, but we can print that way. And that's how we tested it. We actually built a special cradle that could rotate this printer at different angles to see if we could still print effectively, and it was able to do so. So we can now produce highly durable plastic parts on command as required aboard the space station. And this is pretty cool. Why do we need to do this? Why is it so important? Because as we go further into space, as we go further into exploring the solar system, we're not going to be able to bring as much material with us. We have to be able to find materials locally, and we have to be able to reuse and recycle materials that we have with us in the spacecraft. And 3D printing really allows you to do that. It allows you to actually, print a part, use a part for X number of weeks, months, years, and then recycle it back again and use it and print it out again. So it's very, very much similar to what the Star Trek replicators are working on, where they essentially use mass and energy to produce new parts, and then they recycle it back in and keep this loop going. So that's where we get the inspiration for this type of technology. Another cool technology that we're stealing from Star Trek is heads-up displays. So you might recognize Benjamin Sisko there. He's on board one of these Jemadar ships. He has this augmented reality information lens that's giving him information about the status of the spacecraft. Cool idea. Can we do that ourselves? Augmented reality is something that's becoming widespread. Most people know augmented reality from Pokemon Go, which is cool. We're looking into it in a bit more serious way. Can we use augmented reality to provide information to the astronauts, give them information about the status of the vehicle they're in, or give them information about the procedures they need to execute to do their work? So Andrea mentioned that their day aboard the station is very busy. They actually get very detailed instructions of what they have to do, how to carry out repairs, how to carry out scientific experiments. At the moment they use iPads or notebooks and so forth, but in the future you could actually have an augmented reality display giving you all that information dynamically. And we've done this actually, you can actually see one of the prototypes that myself and my team worked on here, where you can see a rover system that looks like a big Christmas tree on the right here, and we have an augmented reality display over it, giving the end user information about how to actually turn on the rover. And they were guided through that process step by step using this augmented reality lens. It's actually the Microsoft HoloLens is what we used for these tests. Another cool idea we stole from Star Trek is the holodeck. So again, who doesn't want a holodeck? We're not quite there yet either, but the idea of using virtual reality to support exploration activities and training activities is actually a really good one. I mean, in Star Trek, they use a holodeck for training. You all remember the Kobayashi Maru scenario. This is a holodeck type environment, I believe it was. But again, why not use it for training? And nowadays, the technology's really caught up to the point where we can use it for our core business of astronaut training. So we've actually developed virtual reality environments that you can actually use to train the astronauts. We've used it, for example, to train the astronauts on how to operate the robotic arm on board the space station. Rather than subjecting them to many hours of PowerPoint presentations on how to do it, we put them into VR, and they can intuitively understand how the arm actually operates and maneuvers. So this is really cool. But why stop there? Why not go a bit further? So we've actually developed as well a virtual reality lunar landscape, which is going to be our next destination for humans after the low Earth orbit. and you can actually walk around on the lunar surface. And we've taken all the wonderful data that agencies at NASA have built up over the years on the moon surface. We've digitized it, we put it into a virtual reality game engine. Essentially, we're using the gaming engine's Unreal 5, which is very, very powerful. And then you can walk around in spectacular detail on the lunar surface. You can actually change the position of the sun, so you can actually see what it looks like to be at polar parts of the moon or equatorial parts of the moon. That's really good, and we're hoping to use this in the future to help train the astronauts about the environment they would experience when they go there before they actually set foot on the moon. It looks a bit scary, but there's actually another use case for virtual reality. We have to train our astronauts on basic anatomy, and why not again, rather than subject them to hours of classical PowerPoint type training, we can actually put them in a virtual reality environment where they can actually move around and explore the human body in a virtual reality space. It looks as weird as it is, but it's a pretty good way to learn, actually, I have to say. So, there's a couple of things that we have stolen from science fiction inspiration, and one of my main jobs actually is looking into the topic of sustainable exploration. How can we make exploration beyond low Earth orbit more sustainable as we go forward? And again, we don't need to look too far in science fiction to see that this is an idea that's been thrown around for many, many decades. So for example, the big red glowy things on the side of the Enterprise, they're actually called pulsar collectors. They were used for actually collecting matter. So as the Enterprise or other Federation starships are flying through the ether, they're actually sucking in matter into these ramjets and storing them inside to be used as part of the replicator systems or part of the matter conversion for the engine power. So it's a good idea. Why not use local resources? In this case, they were using local space dust. My question is, why not use resources on other planets to support yourself for exploration? And this is actually called, we have a concept which captures this. It's called ISRU, and it stands for In Situ Resource Utilization. It's also an ancient Babylonian word, but we're not too concerned by that. But basically, this is the engineering discipline which I do a lot of work in, which is looking into how we can use resources on other planets to support ourselves for exploration. Let's look at the moon. So, when we look at this here, imagine you're MacGyver, and you're looking around here. How do you survive on the moon? What resources, guys, can you see in this picture? Anyone who try? Anything you see in that picture, it looks like a resource. Dust, very good. Rocks, yes, okay. Sunlight, very good. Shadow, okay. I think we've covered most of the major ones, very good. You all survived, congratulations, yeah. But this is a desert, right? This is actually like, a very hostile environment. But when you look at it differently, it's actually, there are resources there. There's dust, we call this lunar regolith, and I'll tell you more about that in a second. There's sunlight, so you can actually harness that sunlight to provide power for your photovoltaic system to survive. There's darkness, which actually we know from our science that actually could contain resources like water ice. So in those dark regions there, you might find water ice, which is water, which is obviously a very important resource for survival. This is what we're trying to kind of achieve with the agency. With some of the work we're doing, we're trying to turn these resources into something that supports exploration. So this picture here, you can see we're harnessing the solar light. You can see we've turned the regolith, the dust, into shielding for our habitats to protect us against the thermal and the radiation environment of the moon. We're taking water out of these permanently shadowed regions, these dark regions, so we can actually produce oxygen and hydrogen for our energy systems. So this is just a nice visualization of many of the technologies that we can actually realize in the future using the resources on the moon. Bit of lunar geology very quickly. One question people always want to know, is it possible to actually make rocket fuel from lunar regolith, from the regolith material that you find all over the moon's surface? So what is lunar regolith? This is this material that covers the entirety of the moon. It's very, very fine, sand-like material. And it's actually a very interesting resource. It's comprised, nearly 40 to 50% of it is actually oxygen. And the rest of it are made up of other interesting elements such as silicon, magnesium, iron, calcium. So it's all there. We need to find a way of actually harnessing it and getting it out. And that's part of the research that we do now in the agency. There's also a lot of water perhaps on the moon, especially in the southern polar regions. So we're looking into ways of actually extracting this water and turning it into something we can use. So if you get water, you get H2O. If you get H2O, you get hydrogen and oxygen. You've got oxidizer there. That's part of the rocket fuel equation. This is something you can actually use to refuel on the moon to go further into the solar system. You can also extract the oxygen. So this is a very terrifying electrochemical experiment, but it's actually possible to use a technique called electrolysis to break the regolith apart and extract the oxygen and the metals from this mixture. So now you can actually extract oxygen and your residual materials, metals. You can use this for 3D printing, for example. And it's not just science fiction anymore. I mean, we've taken inspiration from science fiction, but now we're actually making it science fact. My colleagues at ESTEC, our technical centre in the Netherlands, carried out this experiment there a few years ago, where he took normal regolith, you can see it here on the left-hand side, and they put it through this reactor, this electrochemical reactor, and out comes metal and oxygen was released. It's exceptionally efficient. Maybe all the oxygen was removed from the regolith, leaving behind this really different coloured, metal-coloured soil. So now we've shown that it is possible to extract resources on other planets, and we can use that to support exploration as we go forward. Why not just do something else with the regolith as well? Could you actually build stuff on another planetary surface? The answer is yes. I mean, we as a species are actually very good at making things in different locations. Every time we travel across an ocean, we found a new location, we found local materials, we use that to build our habitations, for example. On the moon, you can do the same thing. You can actually take the regolith soil, you can process it, you can do that in many different ways. For example, you can use concentrated sunlight to melt the regolith. You can use ovens to bake it into bricks. You can use microwaves, which is a really fun experiment to do. You can put regolith inside the microwave, you get a wonderful light display, and out comes a melted brick. Or you can even use lasers, because everything's made better with lasers, right? And we've done this as well. We've shown that this is possible. So again, this is an example from a study a few years ago where we produced a half a ton giant brick. I mean, it's the size of this size here. And we 3D printed this using regolith mixed with a small amount of additive material. So it's entirely possible to do it. And it doesn't have to be big things either. It can be small things. So we've actually produced really small, very fine ceramic parts. Why, you may say? Well, imagine if you're on the moon and your filter breaks. You could phone home, yes, but it's going to take a few months before it gets to you, or you make your own materials in situ and actually make your own product right there then. And this is really important because, of course, as you go further into the solar system, the less dependent on Earth you have to be, and the more important these type of technologies really become. So in conclusion, guys, science fiction has always inspired us, and it's a big driving force for a lot of the work that we do in human spaceflight and for my work in particular. And many clever ideas have come from fictional universes initially, but when you look at them, maybe not that silly, maybe they're actually really interesting. Replicators, holodecks, using local resources, all very, very good ideas, you know. I'll give you a couple of examples here. I hope that shows you a flavour for how science fiction can actually inspire scientists working in this area. And I think this is only the tip of the iceberg. I could spend hours giving you other examples of this, but I don't want to take too much more time on this. So, on behalf of myself and Andrea, and on behalf of my colleagues from the European Space Agency, please come visit us, but also we're happy to field any questions.
Thank you for being here. Thank you again, ESA, for being at FedCon. It's always great to have you here. Thanks for the panel and explanations. My question would be, at the moment we have 2 space stations up there. The ISS, fortunately, the duration was prolonged, but that's not eternity. So what will be the next plans for the international community? I know there are a couple of countries and a couple of private sectors who try to get to Moon, Mars, internationally in the low orbit. What's the international plan to continue ISS?
So the ISS, was extended. There were 2 completely independent engineering analyses that one came up with 2030 and the other came up with 2031. So we are pretty much signed everything to 2030 now with all the countries. And then the most international thing that everyone's working on beyond that is the Lunar Gateway, which is going to be at a Lagrange point of the Moon, and then the collaborations for the lunar base as well. But the gateway will be the next kind of closest thing to the ISS with similar modular construction and different countries working on different things as well. And Europe's going to have a much bigger role in that one as well, like a more essential role, Because currently, in theory, you could detach the Columbus European module and the space station would be fine. So for the gateway, we have many essential parts. You can't detach anything European or it doesn't work anymore. So.
Thanks. Yes, so my question is about the same way. Can you tell us something about the collaboration with the Russian space agency now? Because of the political situation, it seemed quite hard to cooperate with a state like Russia in space, though you told us the space station is quite similar to the United Federation of Planets right now. So what is the cooperation with Russia right now?
Yeah, so we have an intergovernmental agreement that was signed in 1998, which is above all Earth politics, regardless of changes of government, whatever is happening on Earth. The International Space Station is the only project that continues. Obviously, every single other project, and I mean every single other project, completely scrapped. There's no other collaboration with Russia except for the ISS. We're also very interdependent on each other. So the altitude control, for example, for the ISS is Russian thrusters, and the attitude control is American control momentum gyroscopes. So you literally cannot fly the space station unless you have both of them working constantly together. And this collaboration, therefore continues. You can't just stop it, or you'll have a very heavy tonnage, firstly, astronaut lives, and even if you evacuated it, then you'd have a very large structure that would randomly fall somewhere on Earth. So we do want to, continue this, and but we are the only collaborative thing that keeps going, and we're above politics thanks to that. But yeah, everything else is completely gone. I think the greatest, I would say tragedy, at least from our perspective, is the ExoMars project got very postponed, and that was literally ready to launch, and the rocket's been mothballed, and the rover is sitting there trying to get another vehicle maybe in a few years, so we'll see. But yeah, really everything else is stopped, of course, as it should be, but the space station is above politics, and we continue to be so.
Thank you for being here. It's really great. I always look forward to the panels with the ESA, so thank you very, very much for coming each year, first of all. And I have a question about the Moondas again, because when you showed it, I noticed that there's also a lot of material in there that humans need to survive. So like magnesium and things like that. Have there been any projects trying to extract those things as well?
Sorry, the second part of the question is being projects?
You showed a lot of building material and things like that with Moondas, but has there also been experiments where they try to extract the resources so humans maybe can consume them and use them in other ways?
Yeah, we've always been looking at how we can actually use the regulators in different ways. So one experiment that a couple of different groups have carried out is actually, could you grow plants in the regolith as well? Because plants are very good at extracting the resources in the soil to grow. And we've actually shown that it's possible to grow tomatoes inside regolith. It's not the greatest thing for them, but it does work. So actually, you can grow plants inside the regolith. And in fact, recently with my colleagues in the German Aerospace Research Group here, we carried out an experiment where we got some fungi to eat the regolith. And it actually ate the regolith quite happily. It wasn't poisoned by it, it was very happy to eat it. And then it actually basically extruded out some of the other metals and minerals. So it dropped a lot of calcium and magnesium out inside the solution as well. So there's many ways to access this, and there's other biological approaches you can use to get it. So these are topics of active research and very interesting for us.
Now I really have to ask, what kind of fungi?
It was Pacificum, it was Simplicium, and I forget the second part of the name, but if you want, I can get it for you. So it's a very common fungi.
Thank you very much.
Hi, since we are at a science fiction convention, my question goes to you both. How do you stand on the visuals and the setup? The series Expanse, if you've watched it, shows to us how realistic did they do it with the interplanetary travel and the settlements, especially on the Moon and on Mars?
Yes, I love the Expanse. I think they did a great job, and you can actually see that the producers spent a lot of attention to trying to inject as much science fact into the whole series, and they did it without sacrificing the kind of drama and the fun of a good series, right? I mean, if you start applying like 6-month travel times from A to B, yeah, exactly, you're going to be asleep very quickly. So, you know, the one kind of break from normal physics was the Epstein drive, which is what the rockets and the vehicles in the Expanse use for moving around so quickly. But a lot of the other aspects of the show, microgravity, there's no zero gravity plates, everyone floats around. You know, the lunar settlement, they showed like how people are, and the asteroid settlements, they showed that people were adapting to the microgravity environment. You also saw cultural shifts. You know, obviously the Belters have a very different dialect to the normal Terrans and Martians. So you see a lot of really clever things they did to really, you know, show how they can inject good technology demonstrations without killing the drama of the show. So there's a couple of things they did which personally I say I wouldn't have gone there, but a lot of the rest of it was really well done. And I think the relativistic kind of movements of the show, the kind of way spacecraft interact with each other was very well done and as accurate as you can kind of get without killing the drama, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, agreed. And like I said, you know, the countermeasures that you have to do in microgravity if you want to come back to 1G, yeah, you can see the differences in the body types and the adaptations in the Expanse as well, which I thought was really well done.
Hello. Can you please tell me more about the use of augmented reality or virtual reality? Because I work at the public library and make workshops for customers, yeah, I always tell them, oh, there are so many things you can do, medical, and now here you use it in space. So.
Right, so we actually at the centre, we have a special lab we call the Extended Reality Lab, and we look into both augmented reality and virtual reality to support human astronauts here in the training and also for exploration activities in the future. So some examples are for training. You know, how can you use VR to augment the classical astronaut training that Andrea showed in her slides? Because a lot of it can be literally classroom type training. Can we make it more interactive, more intuitive? Can you also use tricks like memory palaces? So whenever you and I learn something, we usually learn it by memorizing certain locations and places that we learn things. We can use that same trick with a visual reference from VR as well. So training is one aspect. We also use it for improving the designs of our systems. So whenever there's a human interacting with some equipment, or perhaps a future equipment, like a future lunar lander, for example, rather than actually building an expensive mock-up and having the human walk around and find the flaws that way, why not do it in virtual reality? Have the human walk around in VR, find the flaws, look at the human factor aspects in VR, and then feed that back. And then we can very, very quickly improve the model and do it again. So we get this kind of iterative feedback at an early stage. You saw the anatomy training as well. Can we use VR and AR to support medical applications in space? And then lastly, worth mentioning, especially since you're coming from a public library, for engagement, for outreach. So we actually bring our VR setup to many different places across Europe to show to the public as well. Because nothing is better than putting a person in a VR headset and having them walk around the moon. It is super, super cool. You know?
Do you use only HoloLens or other products?
We actually use commercially off-the-shelf systems. So we put a strength in ourselves never to create something entirely new. So we're only using systems that are actually available off the shelf. So we use the HTC Vive headset, we use the Oculus, we use the Microsoft HoloLens and so forth. Nothing bespoke. It's all stuff you can buy off Amazon.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. By the way, I like your t-shirt. It's really cool.
Asa, my son is incoming in less than 1 month.
Oh, congratulations.
Sorry, I'm not the first woman to do this.
Yeah, I like the idea to use 3D printers to produce the tools that you need for traveling in space. But what is about the challenge to produce drugs or chemicals that you need for your human health and stuff like this? Is any ideas how you can overcome with this?
Yes, so we've actually been doing a bit of work on two areas. One area we're working on is how can we 3D print biological parts in space. So we're looking into producing a 3D bioprinter. Sounds terrifying. But the idea will be able to produce, using constituent parts, you can graft and grow small microorgans, which we'll initially be using for testing, but could also then in the future perhaps become part of something to replace, if something goes wrong with a human organ, we might be doing the operation somewhere else. For the chemical aspect of things, well, you saw when I talked about processing something like regolith, there's a lot of chemicals that come out of that. So you get all the elemental parts, but you also get compounds as well. So it's actually possible to extract some really interesting chemicals from the lunar regolith, for example, and we're looking into that as well.
There are a few medical consumables that you do need, for example. So to complete the calcium cycle, together with the countermeasures, you need vitamin D. So the astronauts take vitamin D supplements, for example, and that completes the whole bone loading, bone modeling countermeasures cycle together with, you don't need to take more calcium in space. That'll give you kidney stones. You need to take vitamin D so that the whole cycle works together with exercise. That's something we can't extract, but we're looking at that in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, thanks for your interesting talk. Question, so what's your opinion? It's a little bit different science way for you about more rocket science. So ESA is flying with the Ariane 5 and then the future Ariane 6 is coming. And we know that it's a little bit too expensive and when we look into NASA to SpaceX, so what's your meaning? Are we good enough in spaceflight in the European side, or should we go more to our own, or working more with the NASA together? So what's your own opinion?
Yeah. So firstly, in Europe, we're very uniquely friends with everybody, which is great. So we've been able to fly our astronauts on all the vehicles from all the countries for human space flight. And then for satellites, as you mentioned, we've got the Ariane series, which is the most reliable of any rocket, for getting things to orbit safely, as well as Vega for smaller launches as well. So we are actually, in our Director General, very recently made a statement on this. We would like to develop our own additional, firstly, reusable capabilities, and additionally sovereign capabilities to be able to launch our own astronauts and our own cargo vehicles as well. So it's excellent that we can still collaborate, but at the same time we are definitely looking, and we've just put a call to tender actually for European companies, because we're pretty good with engines and rockets at the moment with European companies and within the agencies, but the capsule, the pressurized capsule, that's something that we don't have developed yet, so we've put a call to tender for European companies to look at designing that, and we're looking forward to seeing what we can collaborate within Europe. And yes, we need to drive the costs down. Nobody beats Elon Musk at the moment, but that's not just Europe, that's everybody. So, but yeah, we're definitely looking at more sovereign capabilities within Europe going forward, and working with industry on that. Yeah, good question. And also, can I just say, very happy to see ESA logos on lots of people as well. It's great. Not just NASA logos anymore, which is awesome.
Thanks everyone for your
Yeah, and thank you very much. Our stand, as you know, is just at the top of the stairs. Everything is free. You already paid your taxes, so please come and get lots of fun swag from us. The next talk from our team will be tomorrow. Will be the opening ceremony shortly, of course, as well. So let's all head over there. We won't delay you too much. And also tomorrow, after Richard Dean Anderson on the main stage, we'll do a full panel with several of us. So pretty much open Q&A. So you can ask us anything that you like. And come to chat to us anytime up at the stand as well. We're super happy to talk about all the series and and real life space science and engineering on top of that as well. And we'll see you shortly at the opening ceremony.
Yeah, unlike other public servants, we're very friendly and helpful, so come talk to us.
And we make good replicators.
Vielen Dank, dass ihr euch das Video angesehen habt. Wenn es euch gefallen hat, dann lasst einen Daumen nach oben da. Hier habt ihr nun verschiedene Auswahlmöglichkeiten. Ihr könnt oben links unseren Kanal abonnieren. Oben rechts geht es weiter zu tollen Videos von diesem Event. Unten rechts gelangt ihr zur Internetseite vom nächsten Event. Zu guter Letzt kann ich euch noch den Space Store empfehlen. Hier gibt es alles Mögliche an Fanartikeln zu euren Lieblingsserien und Filmen. Bis demnächst auf diesem Kanal.